Sit down, Bob.
Wait, there's more!
Sit down. I'm not Ralph Edwards, but Bob Moore, this is your freaking life. You knew it was coming.
Well, I knew something had to happen.
That's right.
A little more than Tuesday's celebration. Show 'em your bling! Show 'em your bling!
As you can see by the green towel, we have spared no expense. Bob, it's Friday the 13th, and this is your lucky day. And if you're not nervous, you should be. Today will be a day that you get to live or relive in excruciating detail some of your fondest and perhaps some of your most interesting memories. As you remember in the original This Is Your Life TV show, Bob Edwards would sit the honored guest down. We'd hear a voice from your past.
Ah, do you remember me, you little rascal?
And then you'd sit there like a jerk, trying to guess who it was.
It's Mildred Higgins, your third grade teacher. Remember when I said you'd never amount to anything and you bit me? I still have that scar, Bobby.
I want you to know that we're not going to put you through that kind of embarrassment today. Not at all. We're going to tell you who the people from your past are so that you can pretend to remember them. And they, in turn, will make up some stories that they pretend really happened. And then we'll all go home and pretend none of this ever happened. And by the way, you don't have to worry that we're going to tell that story about the time you came to work with no pants. And that was Tim. In this book, which you will be able to carry for 2-3 days, is your treasured memory. It also contains a legal document you'll be required to sign as a simple Homeland Security formality. We'll get to that later. No big deal. So, after 3 decades, or almost 3 decades at Hawthorne Direct, your friends and co-workers are gathered to celebrate you and your contribution to the company, and perhaps to request payback on some personal favors that you have casually dropped over the years. And I understand, although you'll be retired, that in what some are calling a foolish gesture, you will continue to have the use of your own office. But not the bathroom.
Costs extra, right?
You have no idea how much. Give Bob another drink. Bob has publicly stated that he now wants to lead a news-driven life. He'll be what is called a consultant. Holly fears that a news-driven life will mean that in the middle of the day, she'll find him at home, still in his jammies, sitting in a chrome-covered bed, watching old Seinfeld reruns. She will then come to his office, just so she can get some work done. But then Bob will show up, and he'll stay in his office every day, doing what he's always done. Playing Sudoku, listening to music, playing video games. Except this time, Tim doesn't have to pay him. Bob, you indeed have been an integral part of the HDI family. And also one of its most dysfunctional members. And your contributions will be duly and properly acknowledged today in this dignified ceremony. So stop your darn laughing, Holly. It's a serious stuff. Now, before we cover your Hawthorne years, we think it's important to look back to the beginning so that all of us can see where you might have gone wrong in a way that only a builder of birdhouses can really appreciate. Can we have the first slide, please? This is not a picture of Bob, this is just some neighbor.
back then.
Bob looks quite a bit like the mailman. However, you were born to Laura Lee and Robert in the thriving metropolis of Schenectady, New York, a town pretty much owned and operated by your dad's employer, General Electric. You were the adored second child, or the mysteriously twisted second child, ardently awaited son for whom your mother prayed. Let us just say that the Lord works in strange and mysterious ways. Her prayer later in life would be, "Why me, Lord? Why me?" Now, at this point, I should mention that I spent 4 years in Schenectady at Union College, so I have, these are referred to as the lost years of Jeffrey Hedquist. And I can tell you from personal experience that Schenectady is a fine place to leave. Slide number 2. There's a lot of awe. You and your sister enjoyed a comfortable upbringing, despite your insistence on dressing like what we would call a used car salesman. Perhaps a harbinger of your amazing marketing skills. Yes, you proclaim, clothes make the man. What makes the boy?
Is that photo unretouched?
The photo is unretouched. Bob has been retouched. What you see here is a Photoshop representation of Bob Moore. All right, moving along, and we got to. As you grew older, you were an early adopter of the ironic hipster style, knowing its incredible power on the ladies and all those around you. Let's not.
First day of school. First day of school.
Yeah, he was 43. He didn't eat a lot.
Sweater in September.
Moving along. Never one to turn down a pair of baggy, elastic-waisted pants. You effortlessly combine style with the ease of mom pants. And it's my understanding you were voted best dressed in school a record 8 times because they held you back a couple of years for sheer adorableness. This next weather-related photo is important. Your childhood in upstate New York more than prepared you for your later days here in Iowa. This is a typical beautiful June day in Schenectady. Next we have an unfortunate photo. Beginning to notice girls. You tried whistling to get their attention. But in upstate New York, there are some pretty serious punishments for sexual harassment. Now next, I'm glad everyone is seated.
Seventh grade, Ricky Nelson, right?
You managed to survive your early childhood into grade school where you were voted to have the best crew cut precursor to a mohawk. Pioneered the resurgence of the wing collar for men. By the way, this particular hairstyle is called a Detroit. And only somebody from Schenectady would want to have a Detroit. But wait, look what happened in the transition. Okay. Oh yeah. High school graduation saw you grown into one good-looking buck. And someone who effortlessly, seamlessly communes with nature. From this day onward, Bob Moore was known as a son of a birch. Now, I did some research, and I got this next bit of trivia from the Schenectady police records. Bob and his high school buddies were known as the Horde. Packed into a car, they'd cruise the streets, hollering at girls. Mystified why not one of them would join them for a ride.
True.
Most of the other members of the Horde are out on parole at this time. But then, moving along, you graduated from Lehigh University. where you successfully majored in advanced partying. Anyone who picks out Bob
That very back row
under the L, as in lucky you actually graduated. In this photo, you and your fraternity friends and some homeless people inadvertently reenact the cover of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album, or the first version of Where's Waldo. You decide. Then we get serious. Your wild college days, ironically, launched you into an incredibly conservative incarnation as an auditor at General Electric. Here, you and your fellow feared number bots traveled out from Schenectady to all corners of the country to strike fear in the hearts of GE accounting departments. The aviator glasses alone were enough to make you awesome. But then, the thrill of auditing caused you to swing wildly in the other direction from your corporate post. When you joined your brother-in-law running Mid-South concerts in Memphis, here you were the reliable money guy, often with tens of thousands of rhody payola stuffed into your cowboy boots, and who knows where else. While you and Kelly booked all the greatest rock acts into the largest stadium venues in the American Southeast. We will not bore you today with Bob's stories about the Rolling Stones, Doobie Brothers, Bob Dylan, or Bonnie Raitt, among others. But if you see him after lunch today and ply him with a drink, the stories will come tumbling out.
Halloween, by the way.
Sure it was. Yeah, well, this is the first appearance, by the way, of the infamous carrot costume, along with Bob's brother-in-law smoking a cigarette. And if you look deeply into Bob's eyes, you'll see what the 70s were all about. Doobie Brothers, indeed. Another lifetime pendulum swing, so saw you starting to meditate. And after attending a TM course in Fairfield, you packed up your VW van in Memphis and moved to Fairfield to start, yet again, a new life. By the way, about this photo, Bob had just washed his hair. He went out on a very, very cold morning to give his van a good morning hug. 3 days later, he was found like this. Be thankful you didn't kiss it. Despite your unnatural attachment to the van, you proceeded to charm the Fairfield ladies and make your way into the workforce of a transforming Fairfield and, of course, a transforming Bob Moore. That's enough about the past. Let's move into the relative present. Like so many newcomers to Fairfield, you began to patch together a wide variety of jobs just to make a living. Your first job in Fairfield was an agricultural endeavor in your basement, we understand. It is not what most of you are thinking.
I wish.
It was growing wheatgrass for juicing. Yes, Bob, you were the wheatgrass juice guy. To some of us, you'll always be the wheatgrass juice guy. Now, your next job was working for a company called Crystal Forest. Interestingly, when I first came to Fairfield in the mid-'80s, one of the first projects I did was training videos for Crystal Forest. They sold Swarovski crystal in little kiosks in shopping malls throughout this great land. And the salespeople were all trained to stop people as they came through the mall, holding up, some earrings or something and say, "Aren't these pretty?" Bob has used that phrase as a pickup line for years with varying degrees of success. Well, that's where I first met Bob. And that's where I first met our very first guest, the world-famous speaker, writer, and now author of Happy for No Reason, Marcy Shimoff.
Hi, sweetheart.
Hi. It's so much fun to get to surprise you here, and I get to talk about your first real job in Fairfield after you left that career growing wheatgrass in your basement. And you came to work for Crystal Forest as vice president of operations. And that's where we first met. And I remember meeting you because I was being interviewed by you for a job. And now, this out of your resume, of your career in Fairfield. And that is a job that I don't think anybody in the entire room knows about except for Holly. And that is your first chapter, your first foray into the infomercial world was actually when you and I became business partners and decided to start a company called Never Pay Retail. And we were going to make a fortune on this product. And we created a whole product and an infomercial, and we did a media buy, and we put it out there just ready for all of those orders to come in. And I think after 3 days, we had 4 orders. And we realized that that was over. So I'm glad that the rest of your infomercial career has been much more successful than that. But I think that we were just a little too early on that idea. Maybe you could pick it back up in retirement. So, I just want you to know that Christmas Forest is a better company because of you. I am a better person because of you. For me, you've been a great colleague, fantastic boss, a dedicated business partner, a wonderful boyfriend, but most of all, you've been a magnificent, lifelong dear friend. And you and Holly and Nara are my family forever. I feel blessed. And I just want to congratulate you on a very rich and full career. You've had a career of leadership, of accomplishment, and of true goodness of heart. And I am thrilled for this next chapter of your life, Holly. I love you.
She's getting really syrupy now. Yeah. All right. Our next guest played a very important role in your life as he not only introduced you to Tim, but also to your wife. It's, oh, wait, before that, stand by. Your next job was actually a precursor to Hawthorne. Lots of folks, including me, worked for and with your next boss, who is our next guest, Ed Beckley. To avoid the glare of public recognition, Ed is calling from an undisclosed location somewhere in North America. Ladies and gentlemen, the millionaire maker, Mr. Ed Beckley.
Ed, are you there?
Ed is in silence at this time.
Hey, Ed, is your phone on mute? Tammy, do we know if you called in?
I don't have a real way of knowing.
Okay.
Well,
He did? He's, no.
Oh,
okay.
tired of waiting.
Next one.
all right, very good.
All right, I love you anyway, Ed.
Always succinct. Thank you, Ed. That's great. I love the story about that whole mime thing that he did, which is very. Okay. As I was saying before I got interrupted by some silence, our next guest played an important role as he not only introduced you to Tim, but also to your wife. It's David Chaladoff. Bring him up. And I understand David was also your TM instructor, Bob. Do you remember your mantra? No, of course not. You can barely remember your name.
All right, take it away, David. I have one word of advice for you, Bob. Don't retire. Trust me, I know from experience.
You wait now.
Let's see, I met Bob in 1980 at a party at his house, I think. Wasn't it? Was it your house, that party? Or was it somewhere else?
Where, over near the hospital? Is that how that ran?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
that's where that VW bus is parked.
And then I'm just, so it was fast forward to 1985. I was working for Tim at Fairfield Television Enterprises, and it was April. I think I started in April of '85 there. And you're going to have to help me with the date, Bob, because was it June? Did I bump into you in June? So it was sometime after April, May, or June of 1985. And I'm working with Tim in this startup company, which was a subsidiary of Beckley. And I bumped into Bob in the street, and he wasn't working at the time, I don't think, were you?
I was doing some consulting, or I might have been with Overland. I don't know.
So I said, hey, Bob, why don't you come to work at Fairfield Television? And he goes, well, is there a job there? It was in the street. And I said, well, I think so. Let me talk to Tim about it, and I'll introduce you to Tim. And the rest is history.
All right, here it is.
Then fast forward to Tim left Fairfield TV in the spring of '86, went off and started Hawthorne. By September of '86, it was Tim, myself, and Julie Allen, a secretary. We had a little tiny office in the Tetra building across from everybody's. And then either towards the end of '86 or the beginning of '87, again with the dates, I don't
We
remember.
started here in May.
'87?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I think Tim was he was a little confused. He was having somewhat of a midlife crisis. He brought David Sykes in for some reason, which was really Bob's job.
Well, I was in this business with Marcy.
Yeah, Tim was a little confused. Tim hadn't asked me my advice, and he was listening to Julie Allen, and if any of you remember Julie. Anyway, David came in for a short period of time. I don't remember why he left, and I said, Tim, why don't you bring Bob back in? And Tim brought Bob back in, which was the spring of '87.
In the depot building.
Yeah.
That's right. With Rodney. Was Rodney there at the time? Mike Clark. So Bob and I, we argued, but we had our friendships. We were great friends. We'd argue. We'd go out to lunch. We'd have good laughs. We'd have more arguments. When I left Hawthorne, the day that I was resigning from Hawthorne, I had been there for 3 years. So this was 88 maybe? Whenever. I was so nervous about resigning. I was so stressed about it. I went into Bob's office. I was hyperventilating. I was pacing back and forth. And my good friend Bob was really helping me through that moment in time there. And then, was it 87 that of course you're from Hollis? 87. So
Yeah.
Holly and I lived in the same little apartment building. It was like a fourplex. And one night she just said to me, she knew that Bob and I worked together and were friends, and she goes, Dave, would you bring him home here tonight?
I didn't know.
She didn't know, and I said, sure, I'll bring him home here, no worries, And I brought him home, I introduced them, and that was the end of that. They were married, 9 months later.
Here you go.
No, I did not make that match, Bob. Holly wanted to meet you.
You were a conduit.
Yeah, if you haven't learned by now who's in charge,
Exactly.
You will now.
I had the misfortune of leaving so many years ago, so I haven't really spent that much time with Bob in the working environment for all the years. But the 4 years that I did spend with Bob in the working environment, and we forged a friendship, and he's a wonderful guy, which you all know. He's an incredibly hard worker. He was overly conscientious and overly detail-oriented, but you know what, that's a great asset in any worker, in any company. So, Bob, all I can say is congratulations. If I were you, I wouldn't retire. Give the watch back, stay where you are. This whole retirement thing is a bunch of BS. You look at Warren Buffett, you look at Kirk Kerbokian, he's in his 90s.
True David here.
You look at, who else? There's all these guys, these are billionaires in their 80s and 90s, and they get up and go to work every day because retirement's overrated. But Bob, be happy. Congratulations, you deserve it. I'm so happy for everyone.
David Chalobah. David, there were all too many questions asked of Bob, and I hope that the future testimonials do not ask him any more embarrassing questions because he has no short-term memory. There is no RAM. Occasional bits of ROM, but no RAM. All right. Do we have Ed Beckley on the line? Okay, good. He's off turning someone into another millionaire.
Hey, I saw him on the street this weekend on the square. So, absolutely.
You played many roles at Hawthorne Direct, including a stint as CEO. Our next guest was your intimate partner in numbers, spreadsheets, and payroll, B. Hamry.
You showed me how to retire, B.
He will now explain the IRS audit.
Well, this is exciting. I have Bob Moore to thank for 10 plus years. Can you hear me? And can you really hear me? Yes. That. I found out something this morning that I'm also an alum of Crystal Forest. I didn't realize that, but anyway, I came over and Bob says, well, we need a manager for the media accounting department. At that time, I had 2 different accounting departments. You know, we do media. We buy all over the United States and Canada. No big deal. No big deal. You do it. Well, you know what? There's not one word about media accounting in any of my accounting books that I took as a college. Not one word. So that was a real learning curve for me, but Bob worked me through it. We got it done. I really enjoyed my time at Hawthorne, and I congratulate Bob on his retirement.
Thank you, B. Not one word about the federal indictment. Excellent. Our next guest knew your wife before she met you. Those were the good years. Not hers. Bonnie Rosen. She's your neighbor in Seven Hills. She's been in and out of Hawthorne for years. Ladies and gentlemen, the lovely, the elegant Bonnie Rosen.
I'm going to adjust this for shorter people. How's that? Wow, Bob, this is amazing. Congratulations. Really, really excited and happy for you. I first met Bob probably in the late 80s at some party or dance or something, and of course immediately noticed his good looks. And then in 1990, I was, like many people in town, on and off looking for a job. And so my friend Terry Bauer said to me, call Bob Moore at Hawthorne because they have a temporary job in the accounting department. So I went, okay, that's a good start for me. And so I did, and I called Bob, and like Marcy, I got a great interview for a temporary part-time job. But I was hopeful, and so I got the job, and I started on day 1. And on day 2, I needed to call Bob and say, I'm really sorry, I'm not feeling well, I'm going to have to be out. And then day 3, I was sick, and day 4, I was sick. And this went on for about 2.5 to 3 weeks. And I don't know what it was. I just, was sick. And so, but Bob, every 2 or 3 days would call me, you feeling better? We really need you to come in. I'm going to have to find somebody else. And so this went on for a while. So eventually, I think my guilt forced me out of bed. And I did come in, and I was really happy to do that because I was working in the accounting department calling stations for affidavits, a very exciting job, and was able to eventually move out of accounting over into the media side. So that was my initiation officially with Bob Moore. You know, I then moved, as I mentioned, into the media department, and over time I became actually an account manager. And I got a chance then to work with Bob directly in the account management side of things. The interesting thing was that you would walk into Bob's office and you wouldn't really know if Bob was there. And the reason for that is that he had piles. Yes, some of you may remember that. Piles of files. Everywhere. Desk, filing cabinets, floors, bookcases, everywhere, and you really weren't sure if there was, you know, who's the man behind the curtain, if he was there or not. But then he would come bouncing out, "Hi, Bon," and give me a big hug. And this was very much Bob's presence and demeanor, that he was always big of heart, welcoming and happy to see you, and that has always touched my heart about Bob. The other thing that's touched me about Bob is his intellect. Sharp, clear. It was always a joy to work with you on an account. Sometimes a little intimidating because you were so smart, you know, and a quick study, and was able to really hold the hand of our clients and really make them feel well taken care of. And that was always a wonderful leadership example for me to aspire to. So I really appreciated that. Now, the other side of Bob is his courage. And I say that because Bob would show up at the Hawthorne annual Halloween parties in the most astounding costumes. Yes? How many of you remember that? Okay, a few of you, very good. And so there are two that really stand out. One of them was the tall, no hips, ladies, I mean no hips, carrot. Green sprout at the top of the head, bodysuit orange from feet to neck, carrot. And he wore this maybe 2 or 3 years. not every day, but you know. And he won the award, of course. He won the Halloween costume because it was so astounding, right? So we didn't have a chance of winning. And then that sort of got a little old. Then the next year, he went to the other side of the pendulum and came as a fat, juicy raisin. And danced around the hall with a boombox, and 3 or 4 women following him heard it through the grapevine. And I think he won that year also. So he really was courageous to come in these outrageous costumes, and of course he always won the creativity contest. So that was pretty fun. So the last thing I want to say about Bob is that I had the beautiful opportunity a number of months ago to connect with Bob in a way that I probably had never connected with him before. We took a class together. I've talked about his courage, and I've talked about his creativity, and I've talked about his intelligence and his ability to work with clients. But at this class, Bob, I got a chance to see into your heart, and through your eyes, and into your heart, and connect with you in a way that I'd never connected before. And it really, really moved me to tears, and it made me realize, on top of all these other things, what a special human being you are. So I thank you for all your leadership, for all of your hard work, and congratulate you. Now you can move into the phase of no deadlines, except that we expect to see you walking the pups in our direction every once in a while. Thank you.
guest was a former office manager for several years and worked in the office right across from yours, Bob. He's currently employed at Cambridge, Cynthia McBath.
Thanks. Congratulations on your retirement, and I wish you and Holly the best of everything in your retirement. Enjoy it day by day, every moment. The one memory I had, Bonnie kind of already touched on, but Halloweens have never been the same for me. Bob in his orange carrot costume has been branded into my mind, and I've never been able to forget it, and nobody else has ever topped it, so good job. You know, the one thing that I could rely on Bob was to be there. You know, whenever you needed help with any kind of questions on budget, you know, every year, you know, we had to do a budget, and Bob was always there to answer and help me through it. He once said to me that he was amazed how I handled stress, and that, you know, I had found a unique way of, you know, relieving myself of stress, and I've always remembered that, and whenever I get stressed, I remember Bob believed in me, so now I believed in me. So thank you for all the memories, and thank you for all you did for Hawthorne.
26 years of executive decisions, high pressure, running a company, and people remember his carrot costume. What the hell does that say about a career?
What they don't remember was an organic carrot.
I think Ed Beckley was going to mention that. Ed, are you there? No. Now, talk about dedication. Another graduate of Hawthorne Direct, our next guest, worked closely with Bob for many years. He's now living in Arizona. He has his own company, Direct Response Support Incorporated. So coming here all the way from Arizona on his own dime, I think to request payback on some of the personal favors I mentioned earlier, Doug Vaughn. Yeah, Doug.
Sweating a little bit about what I was going to say about Bob, and I talked to my wife Cammie, and she goes, "Doug, just go to your heart." And as soon as she said it, I go, "Yeah." And what radiated to me was that Bob has such a heart. You know, you just pick it up as soon as you meet him. But Bob and I have a lot of history. And I think I'm going to spare a fair amount of it. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about the early days. About the only other person that was there was David Chaladoff and Tim Hawthorne, and we were at the depot. I hired Ratner.
Yeah, I know.
Well, anyway, we were, as most startups at that point, I would say a little precarious of a company, and there was a little incoherence, and just to give you an idea, and also, you know, we really didn't even have a direction of where we were going to be, and just some of the staff weren't necessarily in the right positions. We had this marketing guy, I won't mention his name, that wanted to cause the personal demise of Tim's executive assistant and office manager. Of course, I think all of it, and Bob, of course, not Bob, but I think on the office manager, I think all of us share the same sentiments, so maybe that's anyway, Bob walked into that, and he just goes, Doug, I know what needs to be done. I just don't know if I'm going to have the time to do it. And so, but he did take the time, you know, and he had nights of cold sweat. And we really, financially, as most new startups were, we had some difficulty, so we're releasing all of our video equipment. And he had to figure out how to get collateral without us having much to put up in order to get the video equipment. So, and he got all that. And so basically, Bob really got the skeleton of Hawthorne going in order to jump us off the ground. And basically, from his gray hair and his attention, he was able to like really give Hawthorne a real booster. And he's partially, a good part, responsible for all of us being here. So we have to extend him a really great thanks for getting us all together. But Bob, I've worked a few times with Hawthorne, a couple times actually, and we still relate because we have some mutual clients. But I worked starting there. I don't know quite when that started, maybe 1988, something like that. And then again in about 1996, 97 to about 2003. And Bob and I have done trade shows together, trying to start new products. We're Spectrum, and then we've initiated some good integration programs going out, media funding and that type of thing. So altogether, it's always been an enriching experience working with Bob, and a rewarding experience, and actually a growing experience. And I thank you very much for not only all the work you've done for Hawthorne, but just having you as my friend, and hoping that always continues. And I should also say that I talked to Brad Bresdeen from Endurance Therapeutics about 3 days ago, and he goes, and I told him about this, and he goes, gosh, wish him my sincere congratulations and appreciation. Apparently you guys like smoked a doobie together or got drunk. Anyway. Anyway, he just, you're not even his account representative.
I know, that's
And he thinks you're the coolest guy in Fairfield. So that's rather amazing. It's just the effect that people have on Bob. So, Bob, thank you very much. Good luck to you.
People even pretend they smoke to join me. Just to be in his aura. Incredible. You're all under arrest. All right. The next guy from your past is your brother-in-law or your brother from another mother and an extended family member, Jim Hall. However, Jim was sorry that he couldn't make it, but he wanted Bob to know that he will contact Bob to give you a personal congratulations. Jim said, hoping you guys really surprise him. Well, nice try on that. And that it is a wonderful celebration of one of the coolest guys I know. Admittedly, Jim doesn't know very many guys. But that's a wonderful sentiment anyway. Now, Jim's signature catchphrase, I guess, which was created by Mira, is that right, when she was young, is especially appropriate today, and that is, everybody laugh. So, in honor of Jim and Bob, everybody laugh. And they're laughing with you, not at you. Except for this table, which is directly laughing at you. Now, our last guest today is by no means the least. In fact, her presence in your life may have driven yours and Hawthorne Direct's success in many ways, as these things go. So, all the way from New York City, on Skype from the Children's Museum of the Arts, your number one girl, Mira. There she is.
Audio.
Hello? Oh, great. Obviously, Skype is not used to that kind of emotional overload. Are you with Ed Beckley? Okay, well, that was a nice try. Ah, well, what can you do? Is this amazing? It's not Mira, but it is a holograph of Mira. It looks so real. Wow, is this incredible? Technology. Now I'm crying. You had to have one surprise. Although every other gift pales in comparison to the holograph of your daughter. All the carbon-based life forms at Hawthorne Direct cannot let you go without showing some appreciation in physical form. So we will now commence with the famous giving of the gifts. Hawthorne employees will come up in order to embarrass themselves with something very special. For you, Bob. Okay, they're not coming up. Ed, are you there? Oh, wait. Here's one of Santa's helpers now. All right. Take it away. You know? Yeah, had him fooled. All right.
Am I to open these?
I don't know the answer to this question. Yeah, answer them. You don't have to open that one. This is what teeth are for.
Oh yeah, I love this. This is perfect. It's kind of a both sides gift. Telemarketer repellent. Hit one of the buttons. Oh, we're going to use this. All we do now is answer and hang up. Whenever you hear the pause, you just hang up, right? This is used.
Wish I had invented it.
That's cool. You're disruptive. Over the hill, potty nightlight. It's on the inside of the lid. It's smart.
Just remember, the lid goes down afterwards.
Say no.
It's from Willie Nelson.
No, it's a bat that has HDI written on it. Is this like for me to apply? This is good.
Somebody's going to tell you.
Pretty presentation. You never know. But I'm not
So what teeth are for? John Swiss Army knife strap.
Whoa! Whoa! An iPod Air, baby! Consultant in me especially loves it. And I'm going to become a little gamer now. This is so much fun. Thank you. Woo! Oh, God. From accounting,
Okay.
yeah. Oh, my God. I can love every other.
There seems to be a special gift from the marketing department.
This has been in hiding back in the marketing department, if you can read what it says.
Robert Moore personal file.
It's his personnel files.
Oh.
This is from before Tammy actually worked here, and we've been hiding them in the marketing closet because we didn't want anyone to be aware of them. So now I'm going to do a little reading
Oh, I
of
bet
one of
you
the
did.
files. Just kidding. Actually, we want to give you the Rockstar Award because this box is full of rocks. I just wanted to scare you. Like this rock, Bob shines from within.
Wow.
There's a whole new meaning to being stoned, doesn't it? Beautiful. Beautiful.
And one little last gift for us that only know Bob as the human being. Little thing of retirement. So that he may find some empowerment. Knowing he can do it. And of course, more and more enchantment.
From the goddess who runs this whole company.
Well, now it's time for what you've all waited for. Lunch. And surprise, Bob, you're buying. Tim understands that it will simply appear as another expense account item. All right. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your heartfelt sentiments. This is my gig, dude. What do you want?
stay after lunch, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
More to come after lunch. So
Yeah.
this is
More to
it.
come.
Oh, absolutely.
Wait, there's more.
There's
Wait.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
This is just the intermission.
Fireworks, strippers, the whole thing.
Picture is taken too.
Unbelievable.
Maybe the last time we have Jeffrey on the road.
Carrot costume. Amazing.
Tammy's got another thing. One thing I want to let people know, a couple things I want to let you know. First of all, during lunch, while we're getting things, this is a great opportunity to get a picture with Bob. If you look right behind Jeffrey, you have a nice display of different costumes that you might wear. You've got a lovely person there to provide a background. So.
Where's the? Oh, here's the background.
Yeah.
So this is the photo booth up here. So everybody gets to come up one at a time and have a photo with Bob.
Not only are you paying, you don't get a chance to eat. It's beautiful.
And second, I wanted to recognize our.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tammy Shaw.
Second thing I wanted to let you know is that the meal today in Bob's honor is being served by his favorite restaurant, The Gardens, and so we have. Yeah, Bob. Yeah. Thanks, Jim. Thanks. So we have a vegetarian lasagna, and we have a shepherd's pie, salad, and soup, and so I hope you'll all enjoy that. And afterwards, we have some wonderful desserts. So.
So, everybody that can stay, please stay, because we've got a lot of exciting things happening after lunch, which is supposed to happen in about 45 minutes, so at 12:45. But I wanted to recognize Tammy and the entire committee that worked on this. So they can be
part of. They have so much creativity, so many good ideas, and they just kept coming with more. Every time I turned around, they had a new angle on something, and they've been just amazing to work with. So I really want to recognize them. They've gone out of their way. Charles, I don't know. Ed! Ed? Ed? No. More Sherry's work a little bit later as well. Good. And Lauren and Isle, and am I missing anybody, have been helping. And Sarah, they've been jumping in with ideas. And Dee Dee, I'm not leaving Dee Dee out. She was getting a guest of honor place because she has just coordinated all of these